Good afternoon. So, third time lucky, I am going to endeavour to stream. And third time lucky and third time and last time, because if this fails, I'm just going to split my wrists and fall off a cliff or something. Um, yeah, so for anyone who hasn't watched me before, my computer's dismal. I got it replaced and it remains dismal. In fact, more dismal than the first. So, despite it supposedly being a new one. But anyway, I'm on the case of trying to get another new one. The problem is I don't want to. Maybe I need to just suck it up and just buy one outright. But I'm looking to get a refund on this one and then upgrade rather than have to upgrade first. Because yeah, I want to fight getting a refund first. Anyway, I didn't want to go into too much detail on Bitcoin on this stream because I did a very long stream about that earlier this week, and price really haven't gone very far from there. And short of doing smaller streams where I give like more tighter entries, we're still in sort of a larger range. I just thought I'd quickly just talk about the longs and shorts. So this is Exocharts that I use to look at the net longs and net shorts, because it can be quite useful, and it's particularly useful in situations like now when the price is very much driven by derivatives. So we haven't had a lot of spot buying. We still seem to have some ETF buying, but I don't know if that's OTC and therefore maybe doesn't affect existing prices so much. I'm not sure. But again, if you look at my previous stream, I looked at the data that showed CBDs, and the spot CBDs are just horrendous. So it's very much derivatives driving the price at the moment. So thus, I was watching here and we had this breakout on, was that Monday or Tuesday at the start of the week? And we had, a lot of strong OI going into that breakout, but it was split between longs and shorts. And Bybit, these are the stablecoin margin. Bybit stablecoin margins pretty much said the same as this. The inverse perpetuals weren't following the same, so I don't know stablecoins. I'm not sure actually which is bigger even, but yeah, the inverse perpetuals, or the net longs and shorts, were just very much sideways, whereas so it was the driving was coming from here. So, and while it looks like these longs were going in on this breakout, in fact most of them went in after the breakout. So once price was already up, or at least on kind of as we broke this high, that's when longs really started going in. Then similarly, shorts kept going in, and then so while I'd had, we had a 3-day supply, I think around here, and then a 12-hour inside the 3-day, maybe around this, so we did get pauses at those areas, which is where I was potentially looking for shorts. But then we had this, blow off top. We also had a wall at 110k, so there were a few things that were sort of a counter to that I was updating the group on as it was happening. So we didn't quite take out, it did actually hold the 3-day 12-hour supply, but just by a couple of dollars at the top. But we had this last push up, which then took out some of these shorts. So that's when I was like, okay, now we can start looking properly for shorts. Similarly here, we had some longs going in at the top. Then we had a lot more consolidation, and then some more longs were going in at this top. And then third time, there were more longs going in at this top. So that's again when you can start seeing the possibility of reversal, when you want to see, so people shorting the bottom, people longing the top. And then also when those people, depending on where they've longed or shorted, where are they going to get taken out? And at what point, so these shorts, you won't necessarily be able to tell when they're going to get taken out unless you look at the liquidation data. But, you want to see that drop off, and then you can start looking for shorts. And then similarly, so on the long side, as I said, most people went in here. So then yesterday when we had this bounce, like I was saying, I was looking for sub 106 at least. And then we also had a CME gap lower. So this first bounce, I was like, the confluence wasn't there across the majors. So anyone who follows me knows I look a lot at confluence of BTC Korea, the Korean pair, the US dollar pair, CME, and all the majors, because if everything is aligned, then that tends to be when you get the bigger moves. And it's not perfect, and I'll show you that on the majors in a minute, but it's really helpful, particularly if you're looking for big moves. Now, that doesn't mean you can't short, you could have shorted here if you wanted to, if there's lower time frame entries. But again, like the holding for the bigger move, it's worth taking note of what the data is doing. So we kind of got to here, and then we started seeing a lot of these longs being taken out after that. There were a lot of people who longed in this area in New York yesterday. Yeah, so that was obviously gave a nice scalp, but was too early for holding it. And then we got this bigger drop. And we also got a drop very deep into what was a flipped 3-day demand down here now. And I had also said that I hadn't put any long entries here at all because I was also quite wary of just the structure of this, and I didn't really trust it. So I'm kind of glad I didn't, because, you know, like normally I would just alert the top of a zone or a zone with inside, but I think the zones inside were very unclear. Possibility of obviously taking more stops, so it doesn't have to stop after it's taken out those longs there. It can just keep going. The other thing I'm a little bit wary of on this bounce we've got now is, apart from the fact it's a Friday, so we've got a war going on, and people were saying that this was as a result of the war. I don't know. I thought normally we would this would be beneficial, but I'm not sure. But obviously we saw gold pump, we saw dollar dump last night, and this was happening at the same time. And indices started to roll over as well. So I'll show you those a bit quickly in a minute. And in general, I'm quite wary of the market right now because of what FX is doing. Dollar's obviously broken down significantly just over the past few months. But it's coming into sort of major zones again quite soon. It's not there yet, but it could be in the next week or two. But also all the Tradfi, you know, we've got a lot of trend line stops, a lot of what could be ending diagonals. And it's hard to judge until they actually break down, but that makes me quite wary that we are sort of we could be coming into a very big move, particularly given Tradfi has been very, very sideways for the last 2 months. So yeah, anyway, on this, yeah, so I can't remember, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, but yeah, what I also would have wanted to see on this bounce is a lot of people shorting the bottom, and that's not really what we've seen. We saw some shorts close on this last move up, but we haven't really seen a whole bunch of shorts go in, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to look back far enough, but I guess, like, so here, for example, on this last run down, we saw the shorts, you know, the shorts were shorting up here as well, but we saw shorts like piling in, slowed down a bit when it actually bottomed, but then some more piled in on the first bounce. And then, yeah, that's, you know, when you start to see that, that's when you're getting the big move up, because then it's going to take out all the shorts. And there were still people shorting, you know, up that last section there. And then they started getting stopped out from here on in. And obviously that didn't mark the top. We just kept going up from there, but that's when the shorts started dying off. But like in an ideal world, when you see a bottom, you want to see the shorts having increased at the bottom. And as you can see here, we haven't seen that at this point. And like I say, it doesn't have to be the case, but it's useful if that is the case. So anyway, but given we're at the end of the week and what Tradfi is doing, I'm kind of a bit loath to, I want to see where the close is. So I want to see if we're going to make a weekly supply on CME. I want to see if we're going to make a weekly supply on the US dollar pair, like on this black line is where it's going to be if it happens. You know, potentially, and yeah, so this is the range, you know, we're clearly right in the middle of the range, you know, we could still hold this range and we could still go up. And, you know, when you look in the bigger picture, you know, you can look, I stay at the very low time frames, but you start looking at the bigger picture and, you know, it still very much could run from here. We are still, you know, we did close above this monthly level. Potentially it's trying to find some sort of support around there. We also had a bounce off this 2-month demand that it made the end of May, and you know it literally closed and then bounced right off that before moving up. So while I can look at the lower time frames and say, you know, like I want to look for shorts and things like that, that doesn't mean, you know, that I think this is going to go down here. But you do need to be wary, you know, like we are in a situation, we look at the weekly chart where this could be a double top. You know, we would like to have seen a stronger breakout than this. Like we had a decent breakout here over the high, few weeks of green before the consolidation, but what I'm not liking here is that this hasn't broken significantly above this high easily, and also that we haven't tested here. So, you know, Bitcoin historically doesn't like to test as like exactly where you want it to, and yeah, so it doesn't have to, but those are sort of the things I'm a little wary of. But, you know, we're not trading on those time frames, that sort of investor kind of behavior. You know, while we're looking at this range, you know, it's bounded by, so again, you can see that we had this upper range, and that's where a lot of the people tried to long here yesterday on this 12-hour, you know, so it was like I had reheld this red zone. And then we've got this one, which is wicked through quite a lot, but that's holding up the bottom of this consolidation. And I've got all these pink lines, which is sort of, there's a whole lot of 4 or 5 day, it's a messy area now. And so, yeah, like I say, we're right slap bang in the middle of the area. I can just as easily see this, going up to fill this gap, close this CME gap, and, back up into this supply, potentially take out these equal highs, as, coming off here, or even probably a little bit lower, actually. Excuse me, let me just delete that. Coming off this sort of 106 area, reflipping that zone back to resistance, and coming back down to the base of this consolidation. But until we've broken this, we're not bearish. So those are the kind of things I'm just watching on this at the moment. I haven't added any new entries in for now. I'll sort of think about that, because I wanted to do an alt session now. Just quickly on Tradfi, just to sort of show. So we had, so obviously the dollar had a drop. What we did have was euro dollar has, at this point, is a swing fail of an annual high. I'm not sure which year, but it's an annual high. And so it's just a question of whether it continues to be a swing fail or whether it actually breaks down. Like in contrast, we have on the dollar, this isn't swing failing. This is, clearly broken down. I had a weak annual demand in here, and it just came straight back through it. It's in a situation, it hasn't tested that one below, so that would be where I would look, and it's a zone, so it doesn't have to bounce off the top, but from, around there, which is at 96.5 mark, that's where I would start potentially looking for longs on this. So that's where that crosses. But yeah, but in contrast, like I say, we do have the euro potentially like swing fading the equivalent. So this is the annual level that this is the dollar has dropped through and retested and rejected. But the euro dollar is slightly not ideally confluent. Anyway, we just need to see what happens here. I still like it could just swing fail this weekly zone here and having taken out those stops and move up from there. It is notorious for not quite reaching zones that I want it to reach. Like this entry here, like I wanted that then, I wanted it then, and I didn't get it until now, and then now it's gone through it. Or it barely gave any bounce on the third time it sort of head to that area. But yeah, so we had a bit of a push up today off there, but just to fill the gap that we made on the news of the war last night. So yeah, potentially this is going to drop a little bit lower. Gold, obviously off the back of the news, had another push. Silver's been pushing. Next level of interest, silver. So those aren't necessarily, there's nothing really of interest on those at this moment. But the main thing I wanted to show was the indices. So you can see on the indices we've all got, so this is the Dow. It's just had this grind up. So they had a lot of zones. We had obviously massive drops. Massive drops for the indices back in April. In most cases we didn't get decent retests, like in this case of the DJI we did get a retest here, but I think NASDAQ and S&P didn't get back to where I wanted to. But since then, when's that, the 21st of April, price has just been going up. And now we've just been building these diagonals, so you can see that's how it looks on the Dow. On S&P it's similar. So S&P and Dow I believe are a monthly supply. NASDAQ's a little bit different. So here again, this is S&P. Again, we had that significant drop. Actually did give a test. Didn't quite hit my level actually, but probably would have hit the alert there. But again, hasn't had a test since then. Left multiple gaps below. And weekly demands untested. And, it can just keep going. Like, obviously these indices can be super strong and just keep going if they want to. They did come off, actually. Again, like NASDAQ, I think hit the yearly level, but I think the others, while my alerts went, is slightly front runner. So again, I'm in two minds. If we come back down, are we just going to run straight through all this and go and retest those zones below? Because I don't like being front run with things like that, particularly. And I've seen Russell has come back. There were zones that kept missing zones that I wanted, and has eventually now come back and taken all of those out on this most recent drop. But again, you can see here that we've got this diagonal that we've just fallen off yesterday. We've got 8 and 12 hour supply on most of the indices now. haven't fully updated these. The only thing is just, are they going to go and take out the highs first? Structurally, if they're coming down into annual demand here, then we expect them to take out the high. But, shorts might get given, at least for scalps and things on the intraday. So I still put short entries, plus we're still in a monthly supply. So, if we are going into recession, we are potentially at the point, where we've had this big drop that we could reject here and drop back down again. And that's what we had, for example, on the yen. The yen had the huge drop with the unraveling of the yen carry trade. Had a decent bounce back up, but actually didn't get as high as this relatively, I don't think. But it did reject here and has just started holding and consolidating in here for months. But if we take this to have tested annual demand, and perhaps it did, I don't draw my demands on the wick, including the upper wick. I include just the body. So arguably, let's look at the annual. Yeah, so this has come into the wick of that, even though it hasn't come into the body. In which case, we're still in an annual uptrend, and we can still potentially expect to take out the high. So yeah, the high time frame is obviously still bullish on this, but those diagonals coupled with the prospect of war, it does make it slightly concerning. I did actually have a long entry in here on the weekly, but I deleted it because I thought the diagonals are just making me nervous. So yeah, I just want to see a little bit more on this. Are we gonna? This is the first. I tried a short. I think there was some news there. I can't remember what that was. I think it was the China tariffs news here. So I tried the kind of aggressive short on that at this point, and obviously went back through and up into the next zone. Yeah, so we need to see a little bit more on this over the next few days. We're into next week now. Nasdaq basically the same. So Nasdaq is only in a 2-week supply up here that I haven't got drawn in at the moment, whereas the others are in monthly. But again, had this diagonal has kind of fallen off it. And indices can be just nasty. So it doesn't. If it could well have fallen off. Do that. It could well have fallen off the diagonal here, do something like that, and then reject. That wouldn't surprise me at all because the indices like to do that. But again, if you want to look for shorts in here based on 12-hour supply, that's something you can do. I had an alert here, I think, for 3-day weekly demand just below. So again, need to see as and when that hits. I think I was tossing up deleting that. I think I left Nasdaq because Nasdaq only being in 2 weeks supply, I thought maybe Nasdaq could get a push to take out the high. And I think I deleted S&P because S&P is in monthly supply. And then the other indices look a little bit different, but again we've got like a little Russell. Let's look at Russell first. So still got a bit of a diagonal on this. Did have that pump up more from it. Came into 2 month supply. Just missed the level by a hair, so I reset the alert. But again, 2 month supply on that. These were the levels that I think were missed on previous. So, it came back down deeper into them. And again, there's another one here that it might go down and take out those lows. That's where I'm expecting Russell to go, is to go and take out these lows. But we shall see. That obviously did hit my long entry for weekly demand in there, but again you can see the diagonal on that. Euro 50 is looking a little more bearish. I was a little bit bit more aggressive on shorts on that, but again only in a weekly supply. But it's just generally the structure's gone a little bit more bearish. J225 is in 3 months, 2 month supply. And then the other two, the sort of slightly more wild card ones, are AU 200 and the UK, the FTSE. So I think, yeah, the FTSE came down into, maybe not into annual demand there, but into 3 month demand, 2 and 3 month demand at the base. Aussie dollar was the other one that came down into an annual demand zone. So again, both of those could take out these highs. I've got the highs alerted. My alert did actually go yesterday for FTSE. I did actually reset it, but it's moved itself back again with the death of the computer a minute ago. So just resetting that alert there. So set alerts for those, if they give swing fails at the highs, but they could just break out because again we are in uptrends. It's just again, the grind that we have, which does sometimes happen on indices, but eventually tends to get wiped. Again on the Aussie dollar here, you can really see that the slow grind up. It's left a lot of gaps below. So all of them have gaps that were left all the way back down here. But again, you can see that it does these grinds and then eventually tends to come back and take out all the stops. But how long it's going to grind up for before it does that, I don't know. So anyway, that's the indices. But just with that, the reason I wanted to highlight that is, I guess, with the threat of war and all these stop humps that have been left below, maybe if we end up with a global threat, that's when these are going to pile through and just take out all the stops. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. Let's quickly look at the other pairs. So dollar CAD has now hit a weekly demand. Again, it's in I think a larger 3-month and 2-month demands there. So again, I would like to see dollar get a bounce potentially here, but not really sure. Dollar yen. The dollar yen, all the yen pairs actually, I had alerts on Aussie yen and pound yen and dollar yen. And to be honest, they're running in ranges. I need to do a separate update on FX, but yeah, they're getting lower probability now. And they wicked quite heavily down into the zones, but they did actually hold the zones before having a push up today. But again, dollar yen, I'm just not sure. That I think can potentially drop lower, so I can still see the dollar going a bit lower, and maybe it will get taken down by the dollar pairs rather than the euro. I'm not sure. And this was dollar Swiss franc. This is what I would show. So again, this has hit, but not high probability. It's going to go into New Zealand dollar. Oh yeah, sorry, that's what I was going to say. So New Zealand dollar, it's better to show you on Aussie dollar actually. We'll look at that in a sec. So dollar Swiss franc again. We might get a double bottom here, but this is not the world's best zone. So on this forex.com chart, we have wicks going through this zone, but I think when I looked at the other brokers, they don't have these wicks. So again, I was potentially looking for longs off this zone here. So we're looking, is this now going to give a double bottom and then move up, or is this now, just doing its gearing up for its next drop? I did have an alert here for, there's an 8-hour supply and also a weekly level in there as well, but it didn't quite. I was again hoping we would get a wick out of that triangle up here before dropping, but it went the other way first. So this still might go up into there, and it may or may not reject there, but I didn't want to be more aggressive on the shorts on that because of all these stops that were left above here again. So something to watch out for. But yeah, just quickly on Aussie dollar, because this is probably we see a lot of that grind and a lot of the stops that are left on most of the FX pairs, but Aussie dollar is the most pronounced. So since mid-April, it's really just been grinding up. But it's in, I think, 3-month supply, 6-month supply. It's messy. The 6 months is a bit cleaner and above, so it could still go higher. But I'm still quite bearish on this on macro. It's just a question of, again, how long it takes grinding through here, and or if it wants to go, right up and test the top of this down move before dropping again. But yeah, it's still grinding in this uptrend. It did have a sort of a blow off bottom, but at some point I would think it's going to come down and take these stops out. And then we had the reverse on Euro Aussie and all the Euro pairs. So again, they've been difficult in these kind of sideways ranges. And this is probably the cleanest of the Euro crosses, or Euro New Zealand, of Euro New Zealand, Euro CAD and Euro Aussie. Euro CAD and Euro New Zealand just a bit more painful. This has been a bit cleaner, but again, left stops up here, so could go up, take those out before potentially dropping. And again, if it's going to drop, this is 3-month demand, it's come off and it's pushing up. So but yeah, that's the FX. But also, yeah, so it's for those reasons I've kind of been wary about the possibility of a big move. Euro Oz wasn't the best example. The Euro CAD, for example, it's now taken out those stops, but again, it's taken a good few weeks to do that. It's a 12-hour chart, so a couple of weeks maybe to go up into there to take out those stops. Yeah, so anyway, I'm just be wary of the prospect of what's going on in the news at the moment causing bigger problems and bigger moves in the market, and then obviously we'll have a knock-on effect on crypto if that's the case. So yeah, not much more I want to say on Bitcoin anyway, because like I said, this was supposed to be just a quick update of that. And yeah, I don't think CME doesn't give much more. The other thing with CME is it made a 2-day supply yesterday as well, and again on the reopen of CME, it dropped straight off that, and that also propelled the bigger move down. Excuse me. So US dollar dominance again, like nothing unsurprising here. You know, it had a push up from here. Would have not been nice if it had gone into supply at this point, but you know, then it came back down, bounced nicely off 3-day demand for a move up here. But again, we're still in this, so I was kind of tossing up whether I feel like this is a rising wedge or whether I feel like it's an inverse head and shoulders. I think whatever time frame I was looking at earlier, it looks like quite a nice inverse head and shoulders here. And it's a decent one as well, because it's what you like to see. You like to see the right shoulder higher than the left shoulder, and then the right neckline higher than the left neckline, and then the right shoulder higher than the left shoulder, and obviously higher than the head as well, because that's showing, you know, strength coming back in for the push up. I still need to see a bit more from this. I mean, it still could just be a rising wedge for a move down in, and again, the zones down here that haven't been tested, that I would like to see tested too. But it would be at least nice for this to get a move up into the weekly supply here, or into the 5-day even higher. So then, yeah, we'll move on to alts, because, yeah, like I said, that's the point of the stream. But I will look at the totals. So, total 3. So this is, again, nothing overly surprising, and kind of what I talked about in the last stream. So we had the bounce off weekly demand here, and I'd said I was just indecisive as to whether, you know, these were going to cause make triangles, or whether this wave is going to take us down for another move down. You know, we were between weekly supply and weekly demand. We had a bounce off weekly demand, we hit weekly supply, and we came back down. What we had here was that we flipped on a lot of alts. You see this, you'll see this on all the majors, you know, that they had this 3-day supply here, which I wasn't generally looking for shorts on, except for some of the weaker alts. So we had this 3-day supply, and then it flipped it to demand. So I wasn't sure if we were going to get bounces off the top of this if the market had been stronger, but in fact, no. Most and many alts have come back and just entirely taken out this zone and basically closing as a giant swing failure on the 3-day. But these charts are exactly the same as what I was saying for Bitcoin. You know, it's looking at, you know, are we going to make, so there's not going to be no weekly supply there, but are we going to make a 5-day supply? And then that's a day and a half until that happens. Today is a 4-day close. So again, if we close about under here on the 4-day, then we're going to make a 4-day supply, and those things will make me more bearish. But we are still at the point here that we've come off weekly supply. If we hold weekly demand here, then there is the potential for that next move up. And that was like, so I'll go back to the others chart. That was what I was thinking more on this. So I put my 3-month supply back into this, because I kept forgetting that overarchingly we were in 3-month supply. But what I had said on this is that potentially, you know, maybe we'd get a move. See if I've still got my drawings. I do have some. Not that one. Yeah, so that maybe we'd get a move up into this, because again, in a perfect world, if you were trading this and you'd wanted to short, you would want a decent, you know, at least a 61, you know, 2/3 retracement of the drop. And at the moment, we're probably, I haven't fibbed it, we're probably only still at a 50% retracement on that. Then again, just quick reiteration of my previous analysis on that. So that was that. Then I was saying, you know, on the last stream, you know, if we were strong, we would potentially run, maybe we could run straight through this weekly supply up to there, but I didn't think that was likely. I thought this was more likely. So, you know, we had those 5 waves up, and then we were potentially going to have an A, B, C down into this lower area to look for longs. And it could still make a triangle here, you know, and that was one of the other possibilities, but those are the ones I was discussing in the last stream. This was, yeah, exactly the same. This was just sort of a smaller picture, a slightly different picture. That we get the drop, we get the retest, we get a drop lower into this demand. We still make a higher low, because also bear in mind that I also think potentially this is going to break down in the bigger picture, but I would just like it to go higher first. Doesn't necessarily mean it will. That would just be, so for me, I guess that's higher probability, but again, we just trade zones as and when they're hit. So if we get to here, I'll start thinking about maybe we can get long entries up to here, but being conscious that I think we're in a 3-month supply and that this could just die. And then the bigger picture, what I've said was that this potentially is a larger head and shoulders. It's not a perfect head and shoulders because I would have liked this shoulder, this neckline to be lower. But, you know, and again, is this the top of the shoulder or are we going to go up there? There's still that possibility, but that's kind of what I was looking at. So yeah, nothing's changed there. We're just still, you know, lower time frame. We're still in that possibility of, right, this could still hold as support again. And you can see here the wick has taken out the 3 days. So this also had the 3-day supply. So again, it's just really a giant swing fail of the 3-day supply, went up into weekly and now back down. And it has, at the moment, it's a swing fail of that low, but we just need to see what build up we get on alts from here. And I had a lot of alt alerts go off, not surprisingly, overnight, heaps of them. And some of them, obviously the earlier ones would have got run through now. A lot of them I disclaimed saying, you know, we're coming. Well, one of my biggest issues have been with this is that we're coming in 3-month supply. So let me just go on to one of the other ones. So they've actually got some new, what do you call them? Tickers. So they've got these total ES, which is excluding stables. So at some point I'm going to replace these total 2 and total 3 with these excluding stables. Unfortunately, they haven't got others excluding stables, but they do have this new total E100, so that's total excluding the top 100 and total excluding the top 50. So I thought that may be interesting to look at over others. And so when I look at that, again, you can see, so this is much cleaner and reflects a lot more of what the alts have done than actually, in fact, others does, because others, I think, is a bit too much. Others excludes the top 10. So therefore, it still includes quite a lot of the majors. So obviously, when I look at alts, like, and I'm looking at those structures, I kind of rather not have the majors in them. But you can see here, this very cleanly, again, 3-month supply was a lot higher than on the others chart, and it's just tapped off it for the drop. So this, I would be like, again, still in the bigger picture between a 3-month demand and a 3-month supply, and coming off an annual demand in this case as well. So this is sort of more bullish than others on macro. But again, like, it's, are we going to get, is this an A, B, C zigzag? Or is this an A, B, C triangle before we get the next alt season, if we ever get another alt season? But at the moment, again, you know, so similar to the structure I just discussed on others on the smaller time frame, you know, we're in exactly the same situation here, but it's fallen, it's come back down into, I guess, that time frame. It's fallen, it's come back down into this 3-month zone here. It's bounced back up, it's rejected 3-month supply, and now it's thinking about it. And it's exactly the same structure as I've talked about many, many times on all the alts as well, that, you know, that they all came off and they were quite neat as well. Like, the difficulty with alts sometimes is they have, a lot of them had 2-month and 3-month supply, like 2-month a little bit lower, then a 3-month, then various zones up here, weeklies, 5 days, etc., that hadn't been tested. So with alts, it can be hard to judge if you know, are they going to react there, or are they just going to run straight up here before reacting? And we have had a mix, but for the most part, they actually have had this nice easy reaction just off the zone. You know, there's been a handful that have just gone crazy and run through everything. But most of those, and again, we've talked about that in the group, that they seem to be like upbit listing seems to be the thing at the moment, that's pumping stuff. So Raven had an upbit listing, and it's held. Like, again, that's somewhat surprising because normally listings or news would just pump an alt and then it would dump 2 days later. But Raven, actually, I think I placed my first possible short alert on it. Maybe not the first, actually, but I did place a possible short alert on it today. So again, that'll be interesting to see what happens when that hits. But yeah, so anyway, again, we're just, you can see we're in this bigger triangle anyway. You know, we're at the point now, higher time frame, we're between 3-month demand and 3-month supply in those two circles. And then we're in, on lower time frame, we're in this case, it's got a 5-day supply and weekly demand here. So everything's just very, very triangle on all time frames. So we really need to, and maybe I just need to be really quite acutely aware of that, because, you know, if we do start breaking down here now, then there's a significant drop. And then similarly, you know, if this does start breaking up here, then we've got a significant pump. So those are, you know, and maybe it's, you know, not quite now, but maybe it's towards the end of the year. You know, we do tend to normally get alt season towards the end of the year. So here was October. This one, November. This was July, so you never know. There's hope for the bulls out there. Maybe we're going to get a pump next month, July, August. There, you know. So, and you know, I like people make these statements all the time. Where we always have alt season in Q4 and things like that. And I tend to look back at the data, and I think no, we don't always do anything. Like sometimes we do, but for me, and again, also we don't have enough data. You know, we've got data on these charts till 2017, you know, but only crypto data from 2013. So when we say things always happen, we mean probably 3 or 4 times in the entire history of crypto. So that's not really a good sample size. And there's also been a lot of discussion with the alt market on what do you call it, the rotation. So people say, oh, you know, people buy Bitcoin, then they rotate into Ether, and that's when you see Ether BTC improve. Then they rotate into the large caps and the majors, and then they start, you know, rolling down into the shitcoins. But again, like the money that's pushed up Bitcoin this time is not, you know, random boys in their mum's basements. The money that's pushed up Bitcoin this time is institutions. So do I think those institutions, do I think BlackRock or the clients of BlackRock are going to start selling their BTC ETFs and going, hey, I'll buy, you know, Shiba or like Dogecoin or, you know, anything, even the bigger ones, unless they become ETFs as well, then maybe that might be a rotation. But I think the rotation is going to change. I don't think those people are going to sort of throw all their money on, you know, Solana shitcoins, or, you know, be making MetaMask wallets to trade, you know, all the new stuff that comes out. So I think it's a different market. And that's kind of also being illustrated by the patterns, you know, when we do look back at all these charts. Look at this, it's got a bit more history, you know, it is rolling over in the same way that Bitcoin, you know, the parabola is rolling over. You know, could this resolve into another big push up? Yes, it could. You know, it is still in a slow grind and again, high time frame. But for me, very much, I sort of see 2 outcomes for this. You know, we are trying to fall off this trend line here. But this can still very much be, again, trying badly, A, B, C. And particularly given this low didn't hit that zone, that would be kind of, again, what I consider to be higher probability, and that's why I've been more inclined to look for shorts. And Ether has had exactly the same. Again, if you follow me on Ether, you know that I was watching this pattern on Ether and that I fully predicted that Ether, so Ether structurally is way lower than this. You know, that's why I say, you know, this is being held up by things like Ripple and BNB and stronger alts. But if you look at Total 2, in fact, even Total 2 is being held up by that. But if you look at Ether, you know, has done this and retraced, and it's kind of, you know, it's not quite hit that zone, but it's in just sort of just above where I would have liked to look for a long there. So again, it's had a much more significant retracement, and it's a much cleaner potential double top. You know, is this a double top? And then again, your targets for a double top are, you know, the top again. So potentially it's that distance. Gone badly, but they're again there. So, and again, from a chart perspective, that's again completely within the realms of possibility. And we don't things don't keep going up forever. And then also, while the other thing is, while I'm a trader, I also don't care because I'm trading this day to day. I'm not trying to buy a bottom and hold it. And again, I keep lecturing people about this because I have to say the chances of you buying, you know, this bottom and saying to yourself, right, I'm going to hold this bottom from October 2023 to March 2024, so 6 months, or you buy that bottom 28th of October and hold it for 3 months, but then you might go, oh, you know, if I'd held it for 6 months, you know, then you're waiting for up here, which a lot of people were, and again, they've been screwed with the drop again. But if you're trading every single, and again, you know, in this period, so if we look from, you know, even from like, I can be biased, but let's look at what's on the screen. You know, we've had one strong up move there, another one there, 1, 2, so let's say 4 strong up moves since, what's that, February 2021. So where are we now? 2025. So that's 4.5 years. We've had 4 decent up moves. We get like 1 a year. But for most of us who are here at the screen the whole time, you know, we want to be trading all of these. And we're going to make a lot of money, more money doing so. And this is assuming, you know, that you do get in these up moves, that you were, you know, around here and you recognized it at the time and you didn't just buy halfway up, and that you then also sold the top. So anyway, I'm digressing and ranting again. So what I'm looking for anyway on these, the other thing I would probably say, so while others and like I said, others and total E100 that I just looked at are back on this support, again, do be aware that total potentially could drop lower, total 2. Again, Ether, yes, they can hold these ranges and potentially push from here, but my preferred long entries would be back down in here. Assuming we're not going to play out that larger head and shoulders, but that would be where I would potentially start to look for longs again, or somewhere down lower. So while you know, and total 3 is back on support as well. But so while others total DeFi, all the altcoins anyway, are sort of holding a support. If BTC and Ether do choose to retrace more of their pump, then obviously these are going to go lower, and then we might see these drops, that drop into there, for example, while this only drops into there, you know, either that immediate demand or into this demand. So, you know, BTC and this total can still potentially hold this as an uptrend. But in the meantime, we could well still see others coming down and playing out my head and shoulders or into here, because obviously alts drop significantly more. Anyway, so that's quite a long explanation of that, but at least I don't talk about Bitcoin this whole thing. So Ether, please load. At least on the plus side, the computer's not being too bad. Still saying excellent connection. The difference is this time I didn't record it. Then I run the risk, if I'm not recording it, then if the stream cuts halfway through or something breaks, then I may not have any backup, is the issue. So Ether, again, just quickly, I haven't added anything on this as well, but just for anyone who hasn't followed me, you know, this was the start of where I was looking for shorts, and I circled the most interesting zone, but it's a giant 3-month zone, and there were obviously many zones inside it. And when you have these grinds down, it can just run through everything, similar to what we saw here. So it is possible this still, you know, can pull off a giant candle, even if it retains this 3-month supply as resistance. Again, just back to the bigger picture, you know, we do have this possibility of a double top. You know, a lot of people are bullish and saying this is going up here, but I don't know, I can't see the structure doing that right now. And, you know, again, if it does, then we'll look for local longs if we can, and then if people want to hold them, they can. But if it does just run up here, then I'll just be looking for the long retest, you know, when it comes back or when it breaks out, you know, if this is going to be bullish. But for me, this just still looks bearish. It's a decent green candle, which obviously throws you off. But then we had the same here, you know, people would have been saying, certainly at this point in time, you know, that this was going to be new all-time high. They would have been calling that as new all-time high, you know, but then it had however many months of sideways. So either we're going to see that again here, you know, if we get, I think the lower probability is we get a giant green candle, but if I miss it, then so be it. POPCAT 20% wick. Okay, hold on. 20% wick, what, down yesterday or up today or something random? Hi, the person who's just followed me. I can't actually read your name because it's in bright yellow and white, and my aging eyesight can't handle that. But hello and appreciate your following. Yeah, so we'll see on Ether, but again, not looking at the high time frames at the moment, or not looking at really adding many entries at the moment. This obviously was just super messy on all time frames. We had held this weekly demand. It was a weekly demand, you know, so it wicked down into there previously. And then, but again, we're just looking at that close. Is it going to close for a new weekly demand over to 25.50? And similarly on CME as well. Like again, that 25.50 level is quite interesting to see where we're going to get the close. Same on ETH BTC. Yeah, might close a new. Let me just get rid of it. Hide that. Let me get this. Yeah, again, like if we close over this black level, then this might create a new weekly demand. And then, you know, this would be nice to get a push into there. And if that's the case, then maybe we will see that giant green candle on the US dollar pair. But yeah, anyway, so this, you know, obviously completely nailed where I was looking for a short entry on this. I was in two minds when we were going up there, actually, because it was such a slow process getting there. And my concern a little bit was that we took stops from here, and it was really perfect straight into that 2-day supply, which is what I talked about and what I wanted. But when I looked at the CME pair, I was like, okay, we're taking stops there, but firstly it's got a gap. It's got a very big gap all the way up to here, in here. But Ether isn't inclined to fill the gaps like Bitcoin is. But yeah, so it's got a big gap, but then also I was thinking, maybe we could push it a little bit higher and take out that wick as that next orange line as well. But again, no, it's just sort of dropped. And similarly over here, you can sort of see that it does tend to find resistance at these bottom of the gap areas as well. And then, in this case, it eventually filled it. But you can see here, that it didn't fill the gap and it went up for a good period of time before it came down and filled this one. So yeah, it's unsurprising that it's left this big gap. But again, yeah, so similar to Bitcoin, we are in a range. We've had a significant drop off the top of the range, but we're still holding. And until we break this weekly demand, I'm not bearish on this. Freeze on the computer again, but yeah, so if, in order for me to be bearish, properly bearish, I'm vaguely bearish because of the fact we're in 3 months supply, but I would still like to see better confirmation. It's been held up here for longer than I would like, but I would like to see a decent supply, a decent time frame of supply that I can look for a short on here. So it would be nice from a short perspective if this closes down here towards the end of the week, and then I would look for shorts in here. And in fact, sorry, scratch that. Really, I'd like it to close below that red box because again, that's what's holding up the whole consolidation. I think that's an 8 or 12 hours. This is a 12 hour. I think I've got it drawn as the 8. But yeah, I would like to see this close below this red box. Take out this channel that I've got drawn in from my love of diagonals. Thanks, Hidden Bull. I appreciate that. I'll have a look at POPCAT for you in a minute. Was there some news on POPCAT? Is that why it's got a 20% wick? And was it up or down? I'll have a look at that for you in a minute because I want to get onto alts. This whole stream was supposed to be about alts, and I've already gone 50 minutes without actually discussing an alt. Anyway, so that's that's Ether. And again, I'll just be pretty quick on majors as well because like I've been lower probability scalps on these. So there's been maybe 70% right rather than as high probability. TRX was my big risk. So TRX also, so the other thing when Bitcoin dumped, TRX through this candle before. So again, always be watching what TRX is doing. So TRX is my new top signal because I've got rid of EOS, and so the majors in general are having that confluence. But TRX, I think, yeah, 5 o'clock had thrown this candle. Let's see what time Bitcoin. I'll probably find out it's 5 o'clock now as well. But please load. I just love the joy of the freezing computer. Doesn't want to load. And it makes me nervous. I'm like, shall I get back to what I was doing before? Or am I going to make it worse if I don't click on something else? I'm learning my lesson now not to just randomly click all over the place. Anyway, that's the others chart, but let's look at, so what was it, 5 o'clock? That TRX came down. So yeah, this was obviously a lot slower. I don't even know what 5 o'clock on which day. I guess it was that. No, that's Thursday. So Wednesday, this is the 5 o'clock candle on Bitcoin. So assuming it's Wednesday, I'll go back and have a look. Or 5 to 6 o'clock. So this just started to fall 5 to 6 o'clock on Wednesday, if that's where I'm talking about. And yeah, so this is Wednesday, 5 o'clock. So TRX had already thrown this large candle. So again, yeah, something to be aware of. The other thing we're getting here, so I did have a long entry here on TRX. Excuse me. Let me go back up to the higher time frame. Hopefully my computer's not going to get tired like on the last stream and start like flaking out halfway through, because that'll be really annoying. Particularly given that I haven't even got to the alts in detail yet. But hey, at least I'm doing a stream. So yeah, this has a weekly. So overall, we're in this daily supply. Like in a perfect world, we would like to go up to that supply to get a decent short. We have a monthly demand down here. So then I would certainly be looking for longs, if it came back into this area. Slight difficulty, obviously, as a monthly demand is much bigger. But that's, I'd start to look from 25 cents on that. But then we had this weekly here, and it's still, it's kind of a fake out of the range. And this is the pattern I talk about a lot on Ether. So on Ripple, we have the triangle pattern, which and then does that. Ether has more of a, it's sort of similar, but it doesn't necessarily, it can be just whatever here. Like it doesn't have to be a triangle, but it will also do this type of pattern. And it's actually more similar to this. So there is a possibility that this is gonna run back through this zone. But yeah, so I had the alert there for this is a big 12-hour demand here. Then I said there was a weekly and various things inside it. So obviously it's not looking overly strong at the moment. I'm not sure if Bitcoin's coming down while I'm talking. The TRX isn't looking that crash hot anyway. Fortunately, it hasn't really left anything decent for me to look for shorts on. But again, it might flip this to a weekly supply, and then I potentially look for shorts there. Again, being conscious that we are coming into a monthly demand potentially below. Then, as I said, with most of the majors, so these Litecoin and Ripple are similar to the new majors, but TRX and BCH were just had their differences. So BCH and TRX obviously stronger. BCH is a challenging one because we're in this massive 3-month supply, but then it's also coming off a 6-month demand at the lows. So I'm just ignoring that and trading both directions. So we were talking about this yesterday because one of the groups thought it looked like it was going to create a daily demand when it was pushing up. I'll show you the lower time frame on this, but when it was pushing up here, so I said no, I have to have a short entry up here. It didn't unfortunately quite hit the alert, but then has come back down into this 3-day demand down here. And this is one of the few that had a stronger close above, so thus held the 3-day demand quite nicely there. And also looks like it might create a weekly in there. So actually that was weekly supply at this point. So it's still in a weekly supply actually, so we need to see a bit more of the close. I've left that alert for possibility of a short on this 4-hour supply, so you can keep a watch on that. For the weekend, that might be worth looking at. Litecoin, we had the alert go for 5-day supply here. So that was, again, that was the confluence. So we had the confluence of TRX doing that large candle. We had the shorts being taken out on Bitcoin. We had the majors. So on the majors, we had Litecoin and Sol hitting supply. They were the two new ones. We already had Link, BCH, Ripple in supply. And it's weird. Why does it say I'm joining? Twitch is saying I'm joining my own stream, so that's quite weird. Anyway, yeah, so we had a lot of good confluence for that drop on Bitcoin, so always worth watching. So Litecoin, yeah, we had the hit of the 5-day supply here, and again, it's come down and taken out those lows, similar to all the others. It had this 3-day, so I haven't got the 3-day in there for some reason. Oh yes, because it's a bit messier. But it had a sort of a fairly poor 3-day flip. Ripple again has this same 3-day flip, and I did alert. I think Ripple and Link were the only two I alerted, in case maybe that was my stream dropping out and then coming back again. That's why it thinks I'm rejoining. Hopefully we're good. Hidden Bull, if you're still there, please let me know if you can still hear me talking okay and the stream's not doing anything crazy. Yeah, anyway, so Ripple and Link I had longs in, but both of them came like really deep inside. I think Link actually was on a daily and I think it broke it, but Ripple is still holding this 3-day, but a bit of a dubious one. Again, Ripple's just, you know, larger triangle. I suspect this is going to fall, but who knows, maybe it gets a pump up here first if the rest of the market can support that. Yeah, so that's the old majors, and other than that, yeah, so the only new thing on that is at the moment this potential short on BCH, and then TRX I just keep an eye on because I think that could make a nice short. Getting the thumbs up, thank you, appreciate that. Maybe it's just the one of my many systems falling apart. I really promise in the next few months the computer situation will be sorted and I'll be able to actually stream properly, not like a crazy lunatic. Okay, yes, here we go. So Link, again, really nice short off there. And I did have the alert for daily demand inside the 3-day here. And obviously it's come down deeper, but it's still holding the 3-day just. But again, it's just, I mean, they're horrible, messy zones. So I was a bit loath to look for longs. And I'm quite glad I didn't because, like, in fact, most of them broke down. So Doggy had the same and it's broken back down. Oh, it's at least at the bottom of the zone. Ada came back through the zone entirely. And at BNB, I also threw in an aggressive short alert. You might like to hide my price labels in the margin. Way cleaner. Oh, what here? I don't know, but then you can't see them. I have no overlapping labels. Which one? Which one do I hide? Simple last price level, no. I guess it's all the, can't remember how to. I don't know, you can tell me how to. But no, I kind of need them because then I want to look at what price. So you can see here BNB has made an 8-hour supply and it's trying to reject that. So haven't looked at these low time frame yet, but obviously it's not looking that promising. They've all had decent bounces, but it's just a question of whether they're gonna come back. So BNB, and again, so similar to, oh, no, you don't have to. No, I know I don't have to, but I don't have to do anything. But I'm happy with the suggestion. That's fine. I'm not offended. I was more, I don't know how to. But I do have, what I hate is when people have the overlapping labels thing. So I go no overlapping labels, and then when you have lots of lines, which in my charts would look horrendous, you then see thousands of prices. So I at least say that they can overlap, because then it's not as horrendous. You currently do not have an active public live stream on YouTube. Looks like I do. Are you still there, Hidden Bulb? No, I'm back. See, I'm having all sorts of problems now. Anyway, we digress. Go back to this. So yeah, this sort of structure again. We're seeing that kind of head and shoulders. You are still there. I don't know why it's just giving me these errors. It's very confusing. I swear your computer's just a piece of shit. Your what's the word? The color of your name just changed. Did you do that, or did that just happen at random? Random shit happens. It's hard to know. So anyway, yeah, this is potentially a head and shoulders here as well. So yeah, I was again looking for the potentially aggressive short on that. So I do think it's worth looking for shorts on BNB, because again, if I'm right on these bigger drops, and then that we see the bigger drops on total and total 2, etc., then some of these alts have the possibility. If this retraces all the way down here, it's a very nice risk to reward if you can get into something like this. I've got an alert there. I didn't quite reach that. Just again, swing failed the 3-day. So again, you'll see I've got sort of these pink dashed lines all over my charts there for the 4 and 5 days, which haven't closed. And as I said, not looking like we're going to get 4-day supplies at the moment, unless we get a significant dump in the next few hours. But I guess we'll see. Yeah, so nothing really new on that other than Link and Ripple going much deeper in the zones. And then all of these, I've still got the lower alerts for if we get the drop deeper. So again, like this is exactly the same structure. Again, all of these pretty much are the same structure that I talked about on the others chart, which is why I talked in so much detail about that, because I haven't got to say so much here. The only other thing of note, I guess, with the new majors is that, so while I had Link, like I said, Link and Ripple had already hit supply. Then we had Sol and LTC for Confluence. But we did have, I was hoping that, DOGE, ADA and the others would all make it up to those supplies, but they didn't. So again, it's not always perfect. So they always ended up as swing fails of the 3-day. Grey screen, that doesn't make me happy. We're back. So moving on to DOT, Atom, NEAR and Sol. So yeah, there's that short alert that I had on Sol that I shared in the stream the other day. So again, if you got that was really nice. NEAR came very close to the zone, but didn't quite hit it. In fact, even like all DOT, Atom and NEAR came close, but they all just ended up rejecting just slightly early, which is unfortunate. And then, I guess they had a lot of wicks and things and a lot of mess from the previous consolidation. So I'm hoping my computer's BTC was above 3-month and 6-month. 3-month and 6-month tick tops. Bullish to close above in 2 weeks, briefly. Yeah. I mean, BTC, I'm not sure if you were here earlier in the stream, but yeah, BTC is just, it's a difficult one because it's broken out in inverted commas, but also can very much be a swing failure at this point. But the 3-month close is going to be super interesting. And even on all these alts and the majors, like quite a lot of them are looking at this point like they might create new 3-month supplies. And if that's the case, then either those alts are going to die forever. And I've talked about that at wick tops. Yeah. Yeah, so if these alts create 3-month supplies, then or 6-month supplies even, then they're probably going to die forever, I think, or at least for my foreseeable lifetime of trading. Yeah, I mean, we can have like late pumps saving us towards the end of the period. So maybe we'll get a late pump at the end of this quarter. But if we don't, I'm scared. At this point, I think it's risky. Hi, Yusuf. Good to see you. I know you can't understand. I'm sad for you. I wish I could speak Turkish, but I can't. Um, but good to see you here. Um, yeah. So anyway, back to this Sol, we had obviously rejection of 5-day supply there, and these three didn't quite make it. And again, I hadn't set any long alerts on these because I was just wary, and I just think again the higher time frame on all of these. Again, don't forget that Atom 3-month supply, Dot 3-month supply, Sol I think is also 3-month maybe, or might be a historical 3. No, it's also a 3-month supply, but it just came up higher inside it. Didn't quite hit the monthly up here. That was the alert went there, but just again slightly front run. And NEIR was the only one that had some space, but again didn't have to go there. But yeah, again, all of these I've got alerts just a little bit lower if we get a bounce a little bit lower, except for Atom because I still think that's going to zero. My alert on that significantly lower. And then yeah, Dot was the only other one. Again, I commented in the stream the other day that this had slightly front run my alert here for this daily. You know, this is already quite deep in the retracement compared to the others. So Dot's obviously weaker on that basis. But yeah, maybe we're going to get a run up to there. That would be nice. And then we get a bigger broadening wedge before this drops. Maybe, you never know. So yeah, anyway, on to the alts. So a lot of these alts, so as I've said, I've disclaimed many of them because I don't know if this one specifically, you can see this cat's here. This one I didn't actually, but so many of these, in fact, this is, so basically when you're looking at the alts, before you buy into anybody on Twitter saying this is alt season or this is going up to, you know, the moon or whatever, even if you've got some nice green candles, look at where your nearest supply is. Am I counting the correction after the 112k top as an impulse on BTC? An impulse down, do you mean? Oh no, now you've made me change my chart. It's all going to go to shit. Do you mean an impulse down? Or do you mean, if you're saying the correction after, so I assume you mean an impulse down? I don't know, like I can't, people are better at judging than me impulses. I just find, I mean, this whole thing I just think is a sideways range. But do you mean this? Like, do I think that's an impulse drop? I would say no, probably. I mean, but I think the actual definition of an impulse, isn't it, is that when it retests. So I guess, yeah, that is an impulse because it's followed the rules of Elliott wave and that it hasn't retraced back into the range of the previous wave, etc. So I guess, yeah, that is an impulse down. But then, you know, how does that help you? Because then, you know, if you took that as an impulse down, like for me, it's like a much more supply and demand. But, you know, if that was an impulse down, then you wanted a shorter retracement. Again, that's fine. That would have given you the short in there. And then, yeah, you're potentially looking at this. But I don't, for me, like, I don't understand, like, I know how to define an impulse based on Elliott wave, but for me, I'm looking at the supply and demand perspectives. You know, this is your demand. You know, all that little thin red zone that I talked about earlier. So for me, when that's broken significantly, yeah, at least so that there's overlap between wave 1 and wave 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not really. Or are you calling this wave 4? I don't know. I don't really class that as an overlap. I think it's allowed to overlap on a wick, but I don't think that's really overlap. I think, I mean, that would be overlap. But yeah, I don't know. That's not something the only thing I really use from an Elliott wave perspective is counting how many, like monthly, weekly profile, point of controls. I mean, I don't use that. I just use my boxes the way I draw them. So I'm like, we've had this here, we've had this up move, we've created a demand here. We're now sitting on top of this, trying to decide if we're going to do another move up. If we break this, then I expect us to go down to the next demand, or the next one down here, or a higher time frame one. The rule is they can't touch. I don't know. I read the rule is that they can do a wick over them. But yeah, so for me, all I'm doing is looking at. But I do count waves in that. So if you've got a 1, 2, I mean, you can't really with Bitcoin because frankly, it'll do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If it wants to. The other thing I find really hard with Elliott waves and with fibs as well, actually, is because people do them from very different places. Like, should you fib from all the way at the bottom here? But I see other people go, no, we fib at the point of breakout. But they back tested it more than I have. But the same with Elliott waves. Like when you're doing these mess at the bottom here, for example, are people like forget that, like, let's assume this is a high and low here. Ignore those wicks. But do people count this as 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.? To me, it's all just it's information. It's maybe useful for other people. For me, it's not useful enough to spend my time trying to figure it out. I've seen too many Elliott wave people be wrong, give 15 different options that completely aren't tradable. So to me, supply and demand is tradable. So if you're saying like monthly, weekly profile, point of controls, I mean, yeah, so point of controls and all that sort of stuff are basically kind of different ways of cutting supply and demand. For me, I'm doing it just off a price chart. But here we're going, okay, we've had a decent up move, we've got a consolidation there. I always look at the lower time frame to kind of go, what's its bounded by? So this went up and then it made this daily demand, and it's messed around in here. This one's a bit wicky through it. But really, if it starts breaking this area, this for me is very borderline. That to me is kind of, yeah, and I said that I think in the previous stream that that's a bit of a breakdown for me. But if I can just delete something there. Yeah, anyway, yeah, so I don't really look at, whether I call it an impulse or not on these. Not something I've really thought about, to be honest. Anyway, back to alts. So what I do look at on alts, and what I was saying before, is that where is the nearest supply, and and it's difficult to know which time frame to use, but on the highest time frame that you have, what supply is currently rejecting price if you're already looking at a chart like this. I've got a bit of a frozen computer again, so just give me a second while this kicks back in. You're gonna kick back in for me? So you can see this anyway, like before I put the method drawings back on it, it's got a 3-week supply there. It's not a strong supply because it actually hasn't closed significantly below that wick unless this current candle does. But while you can look for longs, as I had, the possibility of a long on this daily demand in here today, or in this kind of area, you've got BTC sitting on the VWAP upper band 2 from bear market low at 15k 2022. VWAP upper band 2. Yes, you've got to pay off the complexity of Elliott waves with whether it actually adds to your trading. So for me, supply and demand has been by far and away the most useful thing of all, and supply and demand / market structure, the coupling those two. Then if I'm going to add stuff, I always feel like I should use RSI a bit more, but I don't like divergence. But if I'm going to add stuff, on BTC I tend to add net longs and shorts, CVDs and things like that, so the data, the order flow data, whether ETFs are buying and all those sorts of things. On alts I haven't got the energy to do any of that really, but the difficulty you have really on alts is because most of the zones will give a reaction. It's just a question, so long as you're trading the right direction, like some of these I put in a lot more aggressively. So, but it's just knowing what you're doing. So, as price is coming down here, we had a 3-week supply here. It's come up and tested into there. So you can look for a long here, but know that you're longing still in a downtrend. So then you shouldn't be surprised if that breaks. However, depending on what the structure is on the lower time frame, it doesn't mean it wouldn't necessarily give you a scalp up to there before it does. So then here it's swing fell below, and again started to make an uptrend, so you can look for a long there, like I had a long entry there. But again here, this still hasn't made it through the 3-week supply. So, and that's why I get so critical of people when they're calling alt season and things like that. And if you listen to the earlier in the stream, what I was saying about others and things like that, if things haven't broken out, they haven't broken highs, you can still take them in the other direction, but just know what you're doing. So in this case here, this whole thing, as I showed, is completely is banded by this 3-week supply. It's got a weekly in there as well, and it's now might not have done it actually yet. So it's looking like it might make a 2-month. So at the moment there's and also I think I put preempted those. So I put an alert here based on the fact that it might be able to put, you can see it says 4-day supply and possible weekly 2 months. At the moment it's not a weekly, it hasn't confirmed, it could still close back up here. And the 2-month hasn't confirmed. But if this confirms as a 2-month, then I would potentially look for a bigger drop. But if the close today is down here, which obviously is looking quite likely at this point, then there's no reason you can't get a preemptive short on that. But this is still a downtrend. But the thing is that like most of people, when they see it, they'll see a big green candle here and then decide this is bullish again. Or they'll be looking at the range. But for me, it's very much on supply and demand until we break that. So if you think of like what we just talked about with Bitcoin, this is the upside down version. Until it breaks this zone, this is bearish on Bitcoin. Until it breaks this zone, it's bullish. If it breaks that zone, the bit I then struggle on is if it breaks that zone. So let's say, and Bitcoin is inclined to do this and throws a giant red candle down into this area, and then we've got 2-month demand and we've got various other demands and things like that. Then I'm kind of like, okay, but then you might be bullish on another time frame. So you might then kind of go, okay, well, this is a decent retracement. Maybe we're going to do that from there. I don't like trading. No, I have previously traded the indices. I've managed to lose virtually my life savings on NASDAQ. I'm getting thick. I'm actually really bad on indices and gold because I'm much more biased to short. Like I much prefer shorting. I find it much easier to see shorts on the charts. And like for some reason I'm a lot. I think mostly because I learned in the bear market of after 2017 run. So I think I'm just much more like a lot of people longed in here yesterday on this retest of here, and I was just like, oh, no, I think this is going to go lower. And in this case, good to get a bounce, and then I was right, and then we went lower. But I just find it much easier to see shorts, and I'm much more confident. Even this, okay, so this is the 3-day supply, so that was the first alert there. So while it looks like it's gone a lot higher here, both those two held. So that both of those two are decent short entries. This, if you'd entered right at the beginning, is not wise. With your stop up here or here, then you're still in that short. Oh, SPX, the alt. Oh, okay. Yes, I know that alt. But I haven't specifically traded that. Why would I enjoy trading that one specifically? Yeah. So anyway, yeah. But I'm in general, I'm better at shorting. So I don't like the indices if that's the SPX you were referring to. So yeah. Anyway, so CAT, so you can see here is I've had a lot of alerts go in for possible long entries in the on the prospect that maybe we're going to get a reversal, but a lot of them, like I'll say, in the alerts I kind of disclaimer them. When I don't I do disclaimer them, so that's because not always, but some of them. Yeah, so here cats, for example, 1-day demand still coming from 3-week supply. Like I don't always write that. Like hype, for example, I've got 8-hour supply here, but that's coming from that's a massive uptrend, so that's obviously a very high risk short. And jelly, you've got here 1-day, 1-week supply. Look at jelly. Yeah, so I don't always say where it's coming from, but that's what all these are the things that should be considered where things are coming from and going to. This is, and the other thing I've talked about as well, so the same here, I don't like trading unless we see bigger breakdowns, like after a kind of an ABC. This actually looks cleaner when we got a higher time frame. But so if we say this is an A, B, C, doing a third short here is significantly more risky than that middle short. So of those two alerts that I had there, this one then is a lot more risky because so what I prefer is that if I'm going to take this one, for this to have broken down much more. So this has had a wick through demand there, but I would have preferred in this case for it to have broken a lot more down because then I would expect a bigger move. So yeah, that's that on jelly. risk on that. But yeah, so these alerts go in, and then the people on the Telegram can look at them and decide whether they want to take them and whether it's worth, so here I'll put a note if I think there's something that's worth considering. This is a 1 day, 1 week supply is at that level, and as you can see, it's just tapped into that level now, but it's just be aware the trend line stops there. So if there's any demand, what will tend to happen is if there's any demand, this might come up in here, could come up into the 12-hour, come back down, but if there's any new demand in here, then we might get something like that. So that's just what to be aware of. I deleted that quite fast, but and the other thing that the group have to be aware of is, that I've set this alert, I would have set it sometime, in here, in the last couple of weeks, and I don't know necessarily what this has done, between now and then. This might have dropped back down in here and being, and this being a 3-weekly demand or whatever, in which case maybe you wouldn't want to take that as a short. Or maybe, again, this is held, if we ignore that wick, if this zone was still holding, then again, this short is much less viable. It's a weekly supply, so it's still worth considering, but yeah, anyway, that's that. So these are the alerts that I've had recently. So I put a real mix in. So PRAI. This is a new one, and it's not on Binance, but it's on most of the other exchanges, Bitmart, etc. But it has obviously very little history. Just a couple of months of history. But again, so some of them I just put aggressive. So this I had an aggressive entry. I don't think it was on a 5-day actually. So today I had the 2-day. I know that. I'm not sure what that one was. Maybe it was just a daily supply in there. But you can get what you're looking for on something like this. Some of these can have significant moves. If this is there's no support here. If this doesn't have history from a previous, if you look on Dex Screener or something, it depends if it's brand new or not. Then if this works, the risk to reward can be massive. If you get in on this 2-day and you put your stop up there, and then it ends up going to zero, you can have really, it's got no support unless it's got something on Dex Screener. My disclaimer on that. So I put some aggressive ones in on things with very little history like that, and similarly, I will put them on the long side as well. On this, I didn't have anything here because I didn't look at it, but at this point, I would have considered, and that obviously hit that wick, went into that demand there, but you can get some really good entries right at the beginning of these as well. So this one I've had an aggressive short on. But let's just run through the ones. So there's so many. This is just from yesterday, 12th. So this is the whole list of just from yesterday. Let's look at anything green on here. HOSICO. Okay, so this is an interesting one. So that came down. I actually had an alert there for 4 hour. So again, there's timing. So I had this 4 hour, and the wick, you can see the wick just slightly went through it. But again, very new, but this is something worth watching. Once something's hit supply multiple times, so it hit it there and it didn't manage to make a new low, it's still holding this demand. I had a couple of entries to get the re-entry. So similar to what I just showed you on PRAI, at this point it's looking, for, are we going to get the breakdown that's going to go a long way? At that point it then came back and failed, and I suspect there's probably a daily supply or something like that I was trying to alert there. And then okay, it's gone through it. In this case it's still in 5-day supply, so it's still a bit risky, but it was okay, I had a decent up move while the rest of the market wasn't going up. Yeah, you're smart. Why am I smart specifically? Thank you. I like to think I'm smart, but in what context are we talking? But yeah, so at this point, yeah, then I flipped to potentially taking long. And when they've got very little history like this, but it's trading in both directions. So here, you would have got one decent long, one decent short, another decent short, another failed, so a failed short and a failed long there. Dubious that one, because that probably at least would have given you enough to get out, break even. And then this is again dubious because of the swing fail, but potentially a decent long there. And then I'm just looking for what zones are flipping. So this is not the prettiest. So it'd be quite nice if it closes above here today to make a new 4-day offset demand. Potentially it could create a 2-day locally like to see this move a bit higher though, but then I would start, yeah, looking for, but you can again see it's had a decent up move. This is much more corrective coming down, managed to hold demand at this point, and now it's had a kind of a decent impulsive move up, a stronger move up. I'm scared of saying impulsive now in case Hidden Bull calls me out on being the semantics of what an impulse is. But it's a strong move up with momentum, so again, worth looking for the long re-entry on any demand hasn't been tested. This was like, so sometimes again I'm more aggressive than others, so this one I was more aggressive. I did think, oh, maybe I should put it down here, you know, there's 8 hour, but then sometimes these zones don't get tested, as you can see in this case. Again, now we need to see, you know, is this going to make a triangle? Again, we've got the, again, it's timing on these, and that's why I much prefer to be a trader rather than an investor, because, you know, this is going to reject there, and then, you know, what's it going to do here? Is it going to do that? Or is this going to reject there and come back down? Maybe it will come back down for a long in there. Or maybe the 5-day will play out, you know, if we don't get any flip, rid of that, if we don't get any flip of, actually it's not 5 days, it's a 4-day. If we don't get this flip, 4-day flipping to demand, then, you know, and it's still got a 4-day just above here as well, so it could also still run up into there. It's still quite a messy, low time frame structure, we have to see. But that's kind of the stuff I'm looking out for. Neiro also was something I was quite bullish on. But again, and so, okay, so this is one of the challenges. I'll show you HPOS and Harry in a minute as well. So, and this isn't a monthly supply. So it's a messy monthly supply. Had a few candles and then came back down. It didn't, it's a weak monthly supply because it only wicked through the low. And then it's pushed back up. So it'd certainly be short bias and looking for shorts on the retest. But then obviously this, you know, a couple of shorts on the retest I think I was trying to get in again. So, and this is the example I gave a minute ago. It's like doing the A, B, C, but then the D, E is less likely at this point. Then maybe it's going to push back up again. So it becomes, this is what I should have said on Jelly at the start. You're looking at the first hits, noting that obviously it can go much higher in this monthly if it wants to. You know, it can go all the way up to the top and still up to these zones and still retain this as a monthly supply. And then, you know, if it starts to make structure like this, and again, exactly the same as what I was talking about on Bitcoin, you know, it's got a weekly demand, or it's got a 12-hour at the bottom there, and then it's made a weekly on top of it. Until it breaks that, this is bullish. So now it's kind of like risky, but starting to look for long entries. And it's risky because of the bigger monthly supply. But again, just trade both directions and trade what you see. So if it made new weekly demand, then it was worth a long entry. Then here it was, it was looking for a retest on that 4-hour, I think. So I think it took a deep wick into it, but held it. Then this was a tad too aggressive. Although arguably, like it's probably still a valid, yeah. So that's you know, that would have been aggressive entry on the 5-day demand, and so it's still essentially that entry is still holding. But obviously, most people are traders. You've seen crypto pros, but you've never seen a crypto sis. Really, never? I know there's not many of us, but there's a few. But yes, I'm a crypto sis. And yeah, so again, you know, got a trend line break, so it was like, again, worth looking for the aggressive entry off this 5-day demand here, but obviously noting it can come back down deeper inside. So what I tend to do is I'll set the alert and then I reset the alert. So here we would have had a 5-day go off, and straight away I'll pull it down to the next zone just in case it dips deeper inside the zone. But again, this one's still holding if you traded this on a 5-day, so you can get that initial reaction that may have given you a scalp, then or you know, wait for it to move and then it doesn't move very far and you go close it. Thanks, Hidden Bull. Or you know, you wait for the lower one. So this again, like I quite like this chart. You know, it scares me that it's in this monthly supply, but this is potential. This has potential, so I think you should keep an eye on this one. ZEREBRO is another one. Yeah, so again, so we had so ZEREBRO is, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but this is the guy that pretended to be dead, isn't it? So, I mean, crypto just, you know, when we talk about crypto bros and crypto sisses, like, I don't know, I haven't seen any, I actually know there was that crypto sis that did the scam coin, but she wasn't a crypto sis, she was just an influencer who used crypto to, like, rip off half her followers, which is nice. But yeah, anyway, so Zerebro, like I think around this point in time is when the guy sort of like pretended to kill himself and sold it all off and dumped it down, but it actually didn't dump that much. And then I think he resurrected from the dead and turned out he wasn't dead after all. There's a surprise. Uh, what crypto should you buy in 2025? Yeah, see, if you're new to following me, if you've just like appeared here, like I don't work like that. Like I'm a trader, not an investor. I know nothing about fundamentals, and I also don't believe anybody who says anything about fundamentals because you get stuff like this. And like I remember talking to people about this, here, and obviously it would look really nice at that point. You'd be like, oh yeah, consolidation, go. But no, swing fail, die. Because it really doesn't, like in the crypto world, I just don't think it matters. Like fundamentals just mean nothing until I think it will become more relevant. I think as things become more mainstream. Um, but until and really until regulation. Because so if you think of like if you compare it to stocks, you've got like you've got your massive companies, Amazon, Google, etc., and people invest in those, and then people invest in penny stocks and junk stocks as well, and things like GameStop, well like GameStop was like a dying thing until like the Wall Street boys like pumped it. But at least you can invest in those companies thinking they're actually doing something. So crypto, yes, it's the same principle, but things don't last, and I suspect none of those junk stocks don't last either. And that's not a field that I've been in, but um, yeah, I can't like I wouldn't say what crypto should you buy. I would never give a list. The only thing I will do is give it in the context of TA. So I feel like I want to finish this first, and I was going to say in the context of TA. So I'm thinking of INJ, FET, are the two that are coming into my mind. But I'll get to those in a sec. So just give me a second. I'll finish this because I started. Um, so yeah, this obviously come off monthly supply. It's made a weekly supply. I had an aggressive short, but obviously went higher in the zone. So it's similar as what I've talked about previously. That would have been a 5 day. So that still has held that short, but then it went higher in the zone for a tighter entry, re-entry, re-entry, drop down into demand. So this is something now that might pump, and actually it was one of the few green ones yesterday I was quite surprised about. But it's also a Solana shitcoin, so I don't know. So on with the question I've just been asked, like, is this, given the founder like pretended to kill himself, I'm guessing, well, is he the dev? I mean, I'm guessing he's not developing anymore. Don't know. So is this really going to run? Don't know. If crypto market runs as a whole, then this will run. And I don't think it matters, and that's why I don't say, when you say what crypto should I buy in 2025, I'm just like, But what you should look for is I would say to you, like, get your watch list like this. And if you want a link to my watch list, then you have to ask me on Telegram and I can give you a link to it. But what you're looking for on all these charts, go to the annual chart, and it was actually back in 2020, so that I'm assuming you know some TA, but go to all your annual charts, look for ones like this that have an annual demand. So assuming you know enough TA to know what a demand is, or if you don't, then you need to follow me more and do my educational videos. But so this is an annual demand, green, red, green, prices made it. So basically there's a whole bunch of people who sold here. And you'll stick to regular investments. Yes, I would stick to regular investments. The only thing, when people ask me about investing in crypto, actually, I would say the only thing I would say is for things like Bitcoin and Ether, the big stuff that you think's not going to die and it's going to be around, however many years more, it's not going to be here forever. But um, I would say, I say to people, just buy $100 a week or whatever your budget is, like however much you're willing to lose, because obviously it's crypto and it might all go to zero. Um, but just buy, like literally buy some each day, each week, each month. If you get your monthly pay and you've got a grand that you want to throw into it, just buy 1,000, or put 250 each week. Like make some strategy and just buy each week, because I do think then unless there's obviously a very small possibility that it all goes to zero and Bitcoin implodes. Or Satoshi basically pops up and sells all his Bitcoin, which might well happen at some point. But then I think at some point you should be able to cash out. Again, don't get greedy. Like I think Bitcoin's so high now. I think the chances, and I also that's why I don't really like talking about even investing in it, because I'm like, back when the lowest has been in my trading times has been 3K, and obviously now it's 100k. But you know that like you're just not going to get the same multiples as you used to, and now people want those multiples on alts. And the only way I think you're going to get those multiples on alts is if you go like basically, and as an investor, not a trader, is go to the very high time frames like this. Say, oh look here, there's an annual demand. I just don't know if you'll be able to see it when I put all my stuff back on it. So you can see here this large grey zone. It's got a green, it's got a red. There's a whole bunch of people selling. Then this green is pushed up from here. We've had 2 years of pushing up. When it comes back to test that level, you expect a reaction. So here is where it had a really significant reaction. So, and these when they, you know, even though it wasn't a very strong close, as soon as it came back and tested that level, you then got, what's that, 0.5 to $3 gain. So that's that 500% gain. And some of them are a lot bigger than that. You have 200k investments now, right now, north in Bitcoin. Okay. But I mean, investments, what are you getting? Like, you know, well, actually, no, I mean, the indices are doing pretty well. So if you're investing in stocks, I guess you're probably not doing that badly, assuming you're, I don't know, depending if you're managing yourself and you're only good at managing it, I guess. But if it's just tracking the S&P and things like that, then you're doing fine because they just keep going up. But I do think you should be wary. You know, once things are up a lot. But yeah, in the case of crypto, you know, just when things retest annual zones, so you know, so you'll see, you know, that some of these was obviously more aggressive on, you know, this was a monthly demand in here as well, so that kind of bounced there, but when it came back through, it went deeper inside, but it's in an annual zone. Yes, it's possible. The risk you have, obviously, is that it retraces all the way back down to the bottom here, so, you know, it could still go from, what's that, 50 cents down to 7 cents. But at least that's the higher probability if you're going to be an investor. I would just say look through these charts, look at what's got new annual demand. You know, the stronger the green candle close after the red candle, the better, and then set yourself an alert for there. And when it hits that zone, then maybe you can DCA within that zone. And it would be exactly the same on Bitcoin. So if anybody says to me, you know, should they buy Bitcoin now? Oops, I need to do that. I don't want to be on career either. If anybody, when I say anybody, I mean like layman, I mean like my friends and my mum, not not people actually in crypto. I would say set yourself an alert at 45k and then just buy, keep buying as it goes down. And then, you know, if it breaks that annual zone, then you might be quite screwed. But the chances of that happening are very small in the grand scheme of things. BTC daily wick looking quite good. Is it still holding? Actually, I'm on the Bitcoin chart. It's hard to tell when you're looking at. So far, so good. But yeah, I do bear in mind that it can just, at the end of the day, it has been having more action than normal. Yeah, I mean, I just want to see the reaction in here when it gets up to there. But again, the only thing with that is I do feel like a lot of people are going to be looking at that. That's a very obvious. The CME closed higher, but that's not going to matter if the CME is closed again. I feel like this is more likely. Where are we? Friday. So, well, I mean, I'm actually not going to make a judgment for Friday. What you want to look for if you're trading over the weekend is what Saturday does, because if what Saturday does, Sunday normally reverses. Not always, but if Saturday leaves, what you need to look for is if Saturday's leaving a stock trail, because Sunday and typically London will come and screw over whatever happened on Saturday. So that's kind of all I really care about, given that we're on Friday now. It is Friday, isn't it? I'm not going crazy. Yes, it is Friday. Very hard when you work from home, you just kind of lose all track of time. Anyway, yeah, so back to what I was saying on Bitcoin from an investment perspective, you know, if you want to be more aggressive about it, there's a 2-month demand here, so you can kind of go, you'll, you know, scale in from 93 to 73k, and then if it goes below there, you'll run for the hills, or you wait for that, you know, this yearly level down here at 46k. And if it doesn't get there, it doesn't get there. And again, this is like people ask me about my strategy. Like, my strategy is if something comes to a zone I'm interested in, then I will look for longs or shorts. If it doesn't get to the zone, and people start telling me I'm really bearish, so well, look at this chart for you, and this has had a lot of levels and I haven't refined them recently, but people will look at this chart and they'll say, oh, I've got a green cross there because that's where I'm looking for longs, let's say 84k. And people are like, oh, Elisa, you're so bearish. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not bearish. I don't necessarily, this doesn't mean I think it will go there. necessarily. Sometimes I may think it will go there, but at this point, this doesn't mean I think it will go there. But what I was saying is, if it goes there, then I will look for longs. And yeah, so my intent is not to be super bearish, but it's like if it goes there, I'll look for longs. And the same here, like if it comes here, like when it was down here, it made 3-day supply. It's a 3-day supply. I'm going to look for shorts, and it's given trades. And then, if you choose to hold those, hoping for this target, then that's your own funeral. I wouldn't do that. I might, and then, the next step on this, as I keep saying, is if you see a breakdown of this level, if you've shorted in here and you want to hold a little bit, great. If you see a breakdown of this, you should have taken some profit here because we're at the base of the range. Then if we get a retest here, you can maybe try and add to it. If we get a retest here, you could try and add to it. You might move your stop around. Maybe you keep your stop at the same place up here. Then if it breaks this zone, then you might try and add to it on a retest in here. If it goes there, you'll go to the Bahamas. Where? What, 83k? Are you in some giant short? Can I come to the Bahamas with you? Anyway, that's all because this is supposed to be an all thing. But yeah, so from an investment perspective, this is what you should be looking for. So FET, these are the ones that two came off the top of my head, was FET and INJ, although there are going to be more. INJ. So again, and I'm trying to think of an example. What's an example? TRB. Pretty sure. That's why it's so important. Like, and people say to me, "Oh, why have you got so many lines in your charts?" Well, because I want to know all the time frames, and that's why I have all the colours. Before I go to that, so again, you can see, this has come back down into annual demand. It could go deeper in the zone. Maybe you would have to buy down in here as well. But if it does give a reaction off here, that could be a very significant reaction, and it could just plow through all this supply. And it becomes difficult, and the challenge I have is then like, okay, well, we've got 2 months supply here, but it's coming from annual demand. So, if this is an annual demand and it's going to play out, we could just get straight to the moon. But obviously crypto can sometimes do that, and you can see that here, for example. Here I was looking, potential shorts in here, and then eventually I kind of went to the long side and it broke out, but then again, still looking for potential shorts in here. And then, so I don't always, wouldn't necessarily advocate taking all these trades because remember, I just pull the alerts up, down, and I don't necessarily look at the chart or do any analysis. So you have to know where the market's going and what it's doing. But, and then I'm very obviously heavily on the short side here, but still some longs coming in case this is just going to take off from there. As each zone gets tested, I'm looking at what the entries are, what possibilities you could have for trades. So yeah, this is still very early days on an annual, but this, for example, INJ, we've had one move up, we've got up to weekly supply, we're coming back down and testing. This is absolutely a long that you should be looking for if it gets back to that area. It's a tighter entry on the weekly. You need to look and see what new supply there is. This is going to have a new weekly supply. But if this comes down, maybe you want to fib that wave and get into the 61, and then just put your stop down there from an investment perspective, then just hold it. Can't I make an indicator in ChatGPT to just mark on transparent coloured boxes between each time frame candle bodies? Transparent. Transparent and coloured, isn't that like an oxymoron? I have no idea. Like I'm in ChatGPT. I'm an old-fashioned person that's railing against it because I like using my brain, and I don't like ChatGPT doing everything for me. But if I can, the problem I've had, so I've had people try and make me indicators before, and I'm sure if I got somebody smart enough, they could just make me one. The problem I have a little bit is it's not as simple as, so like for example here, it's not like if it's just a 1, 2, 3, like if it's a green, red, green or red, green, red, then that's easy. But here you've got like a consolidation on the monthly that may or not, excuse me, so actually it happens to be a 2-month in this case. But in some cases, and it's a clean 2 months down there, here, for example, you've got red, green, green, red. And the problem you then have with indicators, you can't, it's getting the, getting the logic to them. I had a friend who was really insisting that he really wanted to help me, can't speak, make an indicator for me, but it was very, very hard for me to go the logic because there's a lot of me in this. There's a lot of And then, and not only that, I mean, yes, it would be nice to have an indicator, but not only that, then there's a whole big part of like, I don't trade every single one of these, even the ones that I learned. So make monthly arrows blue, daily orange. I mean, that's what I do, but I do that myself manually. Um, so, so like, yeah, I mean, you've been in my streams before, you know. So brown is monthly, grey with the grey line is yearly, brown with the brown line is monthly, the zone and the line. Orange is possible swing failure levels, green are significant levels. Light blue is weekly with the black line. You know, like I have a document that's shared. For me, it's very easy now, but then that's why I do it, because then I can easily see where everything is. But yeah, I'd love to have an indicator that would do it for me. But the problem is actually writing an indicator that can effectively mirror what I'm doing. Somebody at one point told me they could machine learn me, and I was like, well, that would be cool. I just have somehow the machine watches me and learns how I'm doing it. But again, like I just don't have that capability, unfortunately. God, I wish I did. Maybe one day I'll be rich enough to like pay somebody to just turn me into a robot, or like one of the Chinese dog army robots. Better than that. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, INJ, FET, two that you should definitely look at because they're at maiden annual demand. TRB was the one I was going to show you. So this actually has a new annual demand here, but I'm pretty sure we'll find out it's not the case. No, it's not the case. Now down an annual demand. I don't know. I just had this had a it was 6 months. There was some reason that this really pumped. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. There's certainly some examples there, like, and if you look at the high time frames on things, like quite often you can figure out, like sometimes I think the history isn't there because the history's been on previous exchanges or whatever, but if you look at why things have done significant pumps, quite often you can go back to them and go, oh yeah, it just bounced off that 6 month demand or whatever, or it rejected 3 month. I mean, you can certainly see it on the supply side. Because people will be like, oh, you know, why did that reject? So like this, for example, you know, and I very much feel like we're in a situation like this now, tiny little zone there, that, you know, people see that and they're like, oh my God, you know, July 2022, bull market, you know, this is going to all-time high, blah, 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 blah. But all it's done is gone straight up into this supply, and this is a monthly chart. So, you know, maybe that was a 3 month supply. So at this point in time, there was a 3 month supply here. I'm going to delete it. I have to make it brown just because that's me. You know, that wick goes straight up into monthly supply and it just comes straight back down again. So, you know, and then if you look at the weekly, that's exactly what that looks like. Comes straight back up into there and then rejects straight back down again. And then, and here's a good example as well. Actually, it doesn't, you know, while the brown doesn't necessarily, sorry, while the monthly, my target would be to break the low. There is nothing wrong with looking for long entries like more aggressively. And again, there's a short re-entry there. In this case, you know, in cryptos like this, it doesn't necessarily give you really nice entries. Like you would have had just enter here with your stop down here and held it from November to June. So that's a long time before you get that up move. And that's why I just don't wait for those up moves, because to kind of like, yeah, if you wait for those, you're going to be waiting a really, really long time. And I've seen some yearly levels fail. I will not give as much of a reaction as you would like. I wish I could think of the examples now, but I can't, unfortunately. Anyway, I was supposed to go through more of these alts, but I haven't. It's now 7 o'clock. I'm streaming for almost 2 hours, so I don't know if there's anything you want to see specifically. Oh, you were asking me about POPCAT. Let's look at that. Let's look at FARTCOIN and POPCAT and Harry and HPOS. That's what I was going to show you. So FARTCOIN. FARTCOIN is an interesting one actually, because this is made a 2 month demand. So made a 2 month demand. It already bounced off it actually before the previous high, and then now it's just come down a little bit deeper inside it. Like I wanted it lower. Like, so again, like my preference is the weekly demand inside the bigger 2 month demand. We may or may not get there. And people get terribly upset, and that's why I like to disclaim what I'm saying, because people get terribly upset. They're like, well, you know, Elisa, you said, you know, you'll wait for 55 cents to buy this. And I'm like, yes, I would wait for 55 cents to buy this. But that doesn't mean that it won't necessarily just go up from here. It could just do and never come down here. But if it, you know, if on the other hand, I see something here, you know, it's got a 4 or 5 day supply there. Let's see. So 5 day supply. If, however, you know, I see it kind of mess around in here, flip that 5 day supply to demand, you know, make a weekly demand, then I'll look, you know, much as we saw on NEIROETH that we looked at the start. You know, if I see something like that, then I'll look for longs up here. But at the moment, you know, based on the bigger structure in this whole up move, that's where I want to look for a long entry. But I'm aware that this is a 2-month supply here, so be aware of that when you're looking for shorts. But you know, so I had this alert here for 4 day supply, and it's got a decent reaction off it. So there's nothing wrong with trading in both directions. So that's FARTCOIN anyway. There's not really much new and exciting on that. But even then, you know, again, maybe you can buy around this 103 mark if you want to aggressively long this. The only thing I didn't like actually when I was looking at this, one thing to be aware of, I just kept thinking, so if you follow me at all, you'll know back here, like I was calling this, that's why I had that short entry. I had a long here. I was like, this has got weekly demand, but this structure looked very much like POPCAT, and POPCAT was somewhere down here around that point in time. So I was like, you know, we're looking, and so I was giving a bit of a commentary on this, and then got that short entry for the big move down, which is what we were expecting at that point. The only thing with what I'm saying here is that's quite similar to this. So it might not be quite ready yet. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't thought it through. I'm just saying it now. But, you know, you have this sort of channel. It gets this blow off top that kind of goes up, probably takes out the top of the channel there, and then runs back through. And this hasn't really had the same blow off top. So I'm not 100% sure on this, but just this structure isn't something that I see as particularly strong. Let's maybe it resembles more POPCAT or maybe a different time frame. Because I know this was also slightly early on this. Because again, you know, it was a similar sort of thing here that it started to look like it was going to die, and then it had this final pump. So I wonder, yeah, we may be waiting for that still on this, you know, that maybe we've got this channel here. This is, you know, this starting to look like it's about to die, and then we're going to get this final pump. When 20 times long. Down here. Okay, anyway, POPCAT, since you just said there was a 20% candle. Orbs has still got a 16% candle. Interesting. Drawings uploading. There we go, it's about to hit. Again, straight up into a 3-month supply, so look for shorts on that when it gets a little bit higher. POPCAT. Where's your 20% candle? What are you talking about? 20% down? Is that what you're talking about? Where's your 20%? I'm confused. Did you just say POPCAT? I'm not going crazy. Who? You there, hidden ball? Anyway, this has not got a 20% candle, or is that like a really tiny 20% candle and it just doesn't look like a 20%? No, that's still only 9%. But 20% down for sure. Anyway, yeah, POPCAT, a little bit lower on this. Again, like the real challenge. So this is the structure I was just talking about there that I resemblance. Oh, on TOSHI. You're bad. Yes, you're bad. Okay, TOSHI. I like TOSHI. See, this is the structure that I just talked about on FARTCOIN. That it's that, yeah, that you've got this sort of channel going up, and then it kind of looks like it wants to die, and then does. This isn't really a blow off top, but then it does, you know, a last push to at least taking out the high before dying. And we had a little one there, and then there was also the sort of bigger picture one, because that was the two I was talking about. Again, where here it's got that, and then it kind of looks like it's going to die, but picked up for the last move. In fact, this last move is not even blow off top, it just looked weak. But yeah, so when FARTCOIN was happening, I was kind of like, there's a lot there resembles that. But here's, yeah, a nice example. Again, just a nice, really clean rejection off 2-month supply there. I mean, it is in this large monthly demand. I came right down to the bottom of it. So yeah, nice long entry, nice short entry. Interim long here. So again, just to for those who don't follow me, long here on 5-day demand or on this weekly demand. So you can do those levels, but they are these are aggressive. So, you know, you want to prefer, again, you prefer a 61% pullback, so that would probably be around here. But these mid-wave, what I call mid-wave zones, and as in mid, you know, this is the wave up, and that's the middle of it. You know, that's in a very aggressive market that we're going to get a move off there. So this might just be like a mini bounce before more down. Because yeah, then we do. So again, here's a good example of it. So yeah, gosh. So here we've come up and we just, so you can get these entries, you know, there'll be some sort of demand there in the middle, you know, where it's moved up, but then you get in contrast, you've got to move up here and it's retraced the whole move. So, you know, you're trying to make a judgment of how much of each wave is going to be retraced, you know, how aggressive you want to be on the entry. At the moment, I don't think we're in a very good market to be aggressively entering particularly, but I've set some of the alerts regardless. Toshi also doesn't have a 20% candle. Toshi 3, that's the same as Toshi, isn't it? Where is this 20% you're saying? Or is that, you know, again, did it do 20% then? No, it's still only 12%. Or you just like make it, you just like guess, like making, what do you call it? Like making them up to make me show you my charts. I suppose now we're on this, I can put, I'm going to put that weekly. I like that, 1,000 Toshi, but this is the same. You must have got a rogue. I'm pretty sure this is the same. So Toshi 3, so the price is 53, 3 zeros, 53. Maybe you've got 1,000 Toshi. I think it's the same pair, but maybe I'm wrong. 1,000 Toshi. Did you say 1,000? Yeah, I bet. Yeah, so it's the same pair. Against where is this 20% you're seeing? Am I going crazy or are you going crazy? This is the Bybit one. So this is the Toshi, but it's the same chart as the one I was looking at. Where is your 20%? This is it. I don't know. I think you're hallucinating. You're smoking some weed. Anyway, yeah, there's definitely not a 20% candle. Well, I guess that was like a 15% or a 10% candle there. Maybe it was 20%. 13%. Anyway, whatever. Okay, forget it. Anyway, Toshi, given you've talked about it, back down here, wait for it to get into here to look for longs. I do have an alert there on, this is a, didn't go off yet, but is a trend line alert for if it has a trend line breakout. Whatever, 30 minutes or 15% wick. Yeah, okay. It's retraced anyway. We're retracing most of it. Are you in that? You trading it? TST fell off a cliff, so that's a nice 17%. Retraded, but again, didn't get down to where I wanted to get to. Market's still looking quite red. XEM is something just completely died. This is something I was talking about, you know, when I say that if things make, I said earlier, if things make 6 months and 3 month supplies and things like that, they might just die forever. So this is something that had an annual supply. I haven't actually got drawn in, but annual supply up here. Oh, oops. XTZ's also got an annual. But yeah, anyway, this is an annual supply up here. Close below. Then this short, you know, it's just come back and tapped into that. Actually, made an annual one underneath, but it's come back and tapped into that zone, and then it's just died. So again, that's another, you know, really good reason why you should have all your all the time frames drawn in. And the amount of times I've seen, so yeah, the amount of times I've seen people, and like all the time, in fact, all day, every day, I see people say, "Oh, go long on this or go short on that," and I'm like, well, if you haven't looked at the time frame, you're like shorting right into a weekly demand or longing right into a monthly supply or something like that. And I saw a lot of people actually looking for longs in these monthly supplies that have just been tested recently. But yeah, this is a really nice example actually of the kind of reaction you can get off an annual zone. It's a big annual and then it made another annual. It takes its time. It's obviously the monthly chart, so but that's why you should be aware of what's going on. What else can I look at? Oh, I was going to look at Harry and HPOS. So, and again, just to give, so Harry and HPOS both look the same. The challenges I'm experiencing at the moment. So, if we look at Harry, so this is in a monthly sideways range basically, but has made 2 months supply. So it's green candle up here, closed back below. It's made a 2 month supply. So I had a short possibility on that 2 month supply. Might also make a 3 months. This is a little bit messy, but anyway, either way, it's coming off a major supply. However, so I had that reaction off there, came back down, slowly came back down into demand, and then obviously all this demand is very choppy, sorry, supply is very choppy and having tested already. So when it hit this demand, it then has pushed higher into the supply. But it makes me like these are the ones that I find hard, like having all the time frames on there. I still like to know what I'm doing. It's like, you know, again, is this at the point where it's going to play out 2 months supply and we've got a rejection here and we're just going to die? Or, you know, I mean, or at that point, even that was just going to die. So it's like, you know, is this a viable long? And, you know, you can see here it was a viable long. It's just gone out enough to take out that high. Could still go up much higher than with the 2 month supply if it wants to there or there. You know, it's got two zones that haven't been tested above. So it's kind of like, you know, so bias I do find quite hard at times. And the same, so again, this hit here yesterday had a decent enough move off this 3-day to make me think it was worth having a possibility of a long entry and alert on this. And you can see it has held, but it hasn't moved very much so far. Excuse me. Oh my gosh. Okay. But yeah, at this point, these are the ones I then find a little bit more challenging. So I don't like the swing fan of the high. It's just stopped this out. It would have been nice if it had consolidated a bit before coming back down into here. But you know, like so it's you know, at this point, are we just continuing this uptrend? Or are we going to play out the bigger downtrend? But again, it's just knowing what zones you're doing and knowing what you're doing. You know, you can take a long in here, you know, if it comes back down a little bit deeper in there. But know that you're longing something that's coming off a swing failure in 3 months supply or 2 months supply. And HPOS basically looks the same, I think. Yeah, it's pretty much this is slightly better actually. It has a 2 month level from over here, but actually has a 3 month supply higher, so this could get another push. A lot of these on the lower time frames are very choppy through here as well, which is why they're not having the hard rejections. So there's pros and cons. There's always pros and cons of you know, whichever side you want to trade. Here there's a 5-day and then a weekly demand, so I've reset the alert if it comes back down and tests the weekly. This I'd be more inclined to trade, I guess. Well, it's difficult, I guess. So this is more of a downtrend because it's broken the low. But at least it's only on a weekly supply in here, whereas in contrast, Harry is on 2 months supply, but then the difference with Harry is it's holding the range low. So again, equally, both have their challenges. Anyway, I can see my computer now getting an error again. So unless it decides to go away, I'm probably going to wrap up. I just wanted to show, so again, some of the just ones that don't work. You know, here's a good example of ones where it has worked now, I guess. I need to update this, put new entries in on that. But here, you know, I was looking for, again, a really surprising move from ICX. I don't know why this moved up, but hit 3 months supply, came back down. I tried the retest entry, went higher inside and came up to this 3-week supply inside, and then also again could have gone higher. So this is an example of something that did go higher in the zone. But you know, obviously now is sort of following Bitcoin and the rest of the market in this bigger drop. But again, like I'm still bearish overarchingly because we're in this 3 month supply. And it's difficult because, you know, like maybe that we are going to alt season, you know, maybe this is, you know, it's like other people will trade this as a break of range low, and when it retests in here, you know, maybe it'll go back and test that 3 month supply and go through it on the second go. So yeah, but like I said, there's just pros and cons of any trade that you take, and I just like to be aware. I'm just super analytical and OCD, so I like to be aware of all the different options and all the things. And certainly if something rejects, I spend most of my time, if I'm wrong, figuring out why I'm wrong. I spend way more of my time figuring out why I'm wrong or what I could have done better. Um, you know, in some cases like this, you know, this I think it's perfectly reasonable when it's had a reaction, it's had a decent reaction off that, initially off that 3 month. It had also a decent reaction on the second test of it. So to then think that maybe this is going to double top and drop from here, I don't think there's nothing wrong with that, you know, and then it just hasn't. It's just managed to pick up support again and it's gone higher. Obviously, it made a daily demand in there. So again, it's always looking at what the local demand and supply is to see for the new entries. Raven's another example of that actually, because that obviously pushed again. So it went into, this is the upbit listing, so it hit my 3 month alert and then my 5 day alert inside the 3 months, so it took all the way up to the top, came all the way back down here. I don't know why my line there is. So I guess that's a 2 week demand there. Yeah, that is a 2 week, hasn't tested it. I had an alert here for the daily, which hasn't come back and tested. But again, you know, I've got an alert on the daily here, and we've got a 2 week here, but we're coming off 3 month supply. So maybe, and I remember doing analysis on this years ago, and I think it might be on the BTC pair. It's got annual supply up here. You know, it's still doing this downtrend. Is it reversing the downtrend? Possibly. I mean, you don't know until it actually breaks the high. But at the moment, this is still in a downtrend. Down, down, down. That's still what we expect to play out until we see otherwise. But yeah, anyway, some of them do push higher and some of them get the reaction immediately off the level. So I always have the alerts on the level. And then, yeah, again, it's just up to people to do their own analysis. And then Raven, I haven't got the thing on here for some reason, but yeah, I have set an alert now on 8 hour supply in there because it has made a little bit, you know, it's still kind of messy. There's still lots of 8 hour demands going down here, and then I've got the alert on the daily down there, so I have to see. I'm not sure if this is going to pick up support. It's a bit more of a challenging structure. Yes, so we shall see. But it does obviously, it looked like it rolled over on the 8 hour there now, so that needs to come through that daily. Anyway, it's now 7:30 and I'm getting quite hungry. I haven't done my steps today either. I should go for a walk. So I'm probably going to wrap up there. I hope you enjoyed it. I didn't do as many alts as I want to do, but I think I gave quite a lot of fairly good information. Week is a nice one there. So I hope that's useful. And yeah, I will try and maybe do another stream. I don't know if I'll do one over the weekend because I need to do FX, but I'll try and do my FX results for the last 2 months over the weekend, and then maybe I'll do another alt stream at the start of next week, and I'll see what's happened with Bitcoin over the weekend. No worries, Hidden Bull, and thank you for chatting to me. Always nice to have somebody to chat to. And yeah, have a good weekend. Please like and subscribe and follow if you're interested. And please also follow my Telegram channel if you want to chat to me on a more frequent basis. And other than that, yeah, have a great weekend. Bye.